everyone, and welcome to the Master of Educational Technology program at UBC, this podcast for Anti-Racism Speaker Series. My name is Dr. Carrie Ewart, and I am a faculty member for the Master of Educational Technology program, what we call here MET at UBC, and the EDI coordinator and designer of the Anti-Racism Speaker Series. I have with me EDI graduate academic assistant, Tamika Fisher, who will be joining us in this podcast. For all of our listeners, one way that we begin our meetings in Canada is to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples on whose taken land we benefit. This is part of a broader national truth and reconciliation effort in Canada and at UBC. I am speaking on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam peoples. Our podcasting booth, Met offices, and servers are located on this territory. And I am honored, humbled, fortunate, and appreciative to work and play on this land. I recognize the historical wrongdoings, violence, and the erasure of Indigenous cultures, traditions, values, and peoples of this land at the hands of this Canadian government. I strive in my own practice and role as Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Coordinator to learn, unlearn, and relearn from a decolonized lens in order to understand, raise awareness, and educate in order to reach a place of equity between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples in what Senator Murray Sinclair states will be 7 to 8 generations to achieve. A more expansive statement of our commitment to the Canada's 94 calls to action can be found on our Met website as the statements on commemorating Canada's National Day for Truth and Reconciliation 2023 with supporting resources. These calls to action invite us to commit to changes. Met has launched a series of podcasts that will explore the role of education and technology in social justice and anti-racism as part of this call. But before doing so, I would like to acknowledge and offer Tamika Fisher to state a territorial acknowledgement if she wishes, as well as Satwinder Bains, our person of interest today. Tamika?
Hi, I'm Tamika Fisher. I'm an uninvited settler, and I respectfully acknowledge that I'm communicating from the ancestral, traditional, and stolen territories of the Musqueam peoples. The traditional language is Halkomelem, and my ancestors are from the island of Honshu in Japan, although my settler grandfather was born on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Swatson, and Kwantlen First Nations. And my settler mother was born on the traditional and unceded territories of the Lower Kootenai First Nations. I'm grateful to my hosts for the privilege of studying, living, working, and recreating in this life-giving place, and I thank them for their stewardship. I recognize my responsibility to take action to reduce the racism, oppression, and harms Indigenous peoples experience and continue to experience and work towards reconciliation.
Mr. Bains?
Hi, I'm Satwinder Bains, and I'm acknowledging today that I'm coming to you from the land of the Stolo people, the Halkomelem speaking people of the river. I give thanks to them for inviting me in, even as a settler immigrant to this community. I come from a country that has also been settled by colonists for 300 years. I come from India originally as an immigrant, and I have faced both colonial settlement in India as well as here in Canada, and I see so much similarity in terms of one of the things I've recognized is that we internalize the racism that is imposed on us. And I really want to work hard to understand what racism has done to our communities in the Valley and to work with the Stolo people to foreground their knowledge and their histories before I even speak about mine, because they were here much more earlier than we were. And to just start with my immigrant history doesn't do justice to their displacement that we were all culpable with.
Thank you, Dr. Bains. Now, the Master of Educational Technology, or MET program, educates professionals on the use and impact of digital learning technologies. This fully online graduate program provides a unique opportunity for our students to engage in topics such as the role of EdTech in racism and anti-racism. Since the degree program was launched in 2002, close to 2,000 individuals have enrolled in the UBC MET program, with more than 450 students enrolled currently. MET dedicates itself to supporting its learners, stakeholders, and the public to make a positive change in communities. What is the speaker series about, and why are we talking about this in our podcast? Tamika?
Thank you, Carrie. The purpose of this speaker series is to acknowledge the commitment that every individual has to inclusivity and to addressing systemic racism. With the focus on anti-Indigenous, anti-Black, and anti-people of color racism, this series seeks to identify the responsibility educators and leaders have to facilitating and supporting anti-racist approaches and strategies within their practice to enhance and transform learning environments and learning cultures. With a specific directive being digital technologies, presenters and guests will discuss racism and tools to support equity, diversity, and inclusivity and the changing dynamics of the digital age. Carrie?
As a result, at MET, we are committed to a follow-up to each presentation of the speaker series with a call to action challenge. We invite listeners to make one change this month, no matter how small, and to share it with us as a next step to this podcast to eradicate racism through community building, education, and through the use of educational technologies. This call to action provides you the opportunity as listeners of this podcast to build on the anti-racist content from which this session and make steps towards change. For example, you might integrate what you've heard today and think about from this podcast what lesson plans or what workshops you can do to raise awareness for the issues of racism for students, colleagues, and friends. We will provide you with more details for this call for proposals at the end of this podcast. The topic for today's podcast is building anti-racism frameworks to transform education.
On today's episode, we are honored to welcome Dr. Satwinder Bains, Director of South Asian Studies Institute at the University of Fraser Valley, Principal of UFB India, College of Art School, Culture, Society, and Media Studies, and Curator for the Gurseek Temple at the Museum in Gurseek Temple. On today's episode, we are honored to welcome Dr. Satwinder Bains, Director of South Asian Studies Institute at the University of the Fraser Valley, Principal of UFB India, College of Arts, School of Culture, Society and Media Studies, and Curator for the Gurseek Temple Museum in Abbotsford, which was purpose-built and is the oldest temple in the Western Hemisphere. At this time, we welcome you to introduce yourself to our listeners, Dr. Bains.
Thank you for that kind introduction, both Carrie and Tamaka. I'm honored to be with you in this series. My role here is multifaceted at the University of the Fraser Valley. I direct a research institute. I'm an associate professor, and I also curate a Sikh Heritage Museum, which is our relationship with the community. So my work here is really grounded in bringing community in, and for us to do both in-reach and outreach, and to be responding to community on contemporary issues, but also historic issues. So it's a very varied bag, and I truly enjoy my mornings and my afternoons and my late evenings at work, where we hope we are using our knowledge, building relationships and transforming how we educate our young people in the school, in the university system. So it's an honor for me to be doing this work. And I always say, if you can do what you love and love what you do, that's more than you can ask for.
That completely resonates with me and one of my mantras every day. Thank you so much, Dr. Bains, for joining us. It's so nice to have you. And I think we'll get started in asking you a lot of questions just to learn more about you and what you do. So can you tell us a little bit about the work that you do, the evolution of this work, and where your passion comes from for this work?
So the evolution really comes, it's a very long story, but I'll keep it short. It comes from me being really interested in transforming communities. And it comes from me, it comes as an immigrant. I arrived in Canada in 1975 and immediately faced all kinds of racism, which I couldn't really name initially. I didn't know what was going on because it was a totally different world that I was in. I grew up in India, and so everybody was like me. I didn't feel the sting and barbs of racism. I certainly felt communalism, but not racism to this extent. So as I progressed into living in Canada, I started to think, how can I affect change how just as one person. And my whole commitment has been around diversity education and understanding multiculturalism and working within cultural communities. So that's where the evolution started, was for me to give back to Canada for everything that I've taken from this beautiful country, and to really transform people's ways of thinking. I saw the platform of education as a really valuable tool, both in the formal sector as well as in the informal sector. So I've given my time, my energy, my thoughts, my knowledge, my theories, my experiences to the communities that I work with an effort to have them understand a little bit more about people's journeys. And I'm a real proponent of storytelling. I really believe that our experiences need to be shared. They need to be recorded. They need to be understood. They need to be believed. So all that work has brought me to this point where, 20 years or so ago, I started working at the University of the Fraser Valley, where previously I was doing some sessional work, doing cross-cultural training, as well as some curriculum design around getting schools of practice like social work and nursing and psychology for their students to become more cross-culturally aware. This is about 30 years ago. And then as I did that work, I realized my joy and passion is with curriculum. So I started designing curriculum, and then the institute idea came up. So right now I run a research institute, which allows me to do my life's passion, my work, to understand South Asian Canadian diaspora living. So our work is situated in the present moment, about how the diaspora has moved to BC, especially, and we do some pan-Canada work as well, but to understand all the facets and rich and robust experiences that people have had, and to highlight and challenge some of the oppression that they have also felt over time and continue to feel. So it's a kind of a two-way street where I do a lot of research, but I also engage the community with the research. So it allows me to have impact in a much more direct manner. So we invite people into the Institute to hear other speakers. We interview them ourselves, and we've interviewed about 500 people now, where we have recorded histories. The South Asian community in BC is quite large, but our history has mostly been erased or omitted or neglected from the Canadian record. And our goal is to establish that record. So for the last 10 years, we've been writing the history of South Asian Canadians. We published a book in 2022 on the social history of South Asians in British Columbia. And it's the most comprehensive a book that I feel that speaks to the kind of the diversity of South Asian migration, their politics and their identity. So that allowed me to get that into people's hands, and hopefully they read a chapter or two and get a deeper sense of our community, both its migration, its settlement, its adaptation, and its integration.
Wow, that is absolutely incredible. And through narrative, through storytelling, we recognize what a powerful source that is, and being able to revitalize people's stories and their truth and lived experiences through the work that you're doing, as well as through this amazing book that you've published, which will for sure include that within our podcast. I think that creates and provides both me as well as our listeners with this incredible foundation to understanding both your passion as well as where this work has come from and where it's moving in time. Thank you for sharing that. Pamika?
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bains. And now we would love to hear a little bit about the curation work that you do at the Gursikh Temple and Heritage Museum.
So for South Asian Canadians, because we're a collective society and we're not an oral community, we don't have a lot of history that we can touch and hold and speak to and experience. So our history is through the lives of people's experiences, except this one building, which, fortunately for me, is in my hometown. It's a Gursikh Gurdwara, which a temple that was started to be built in 1908 by about 50 men who worked at the Trisui mill at the time. And it stands in the middle of town. And we want to celebrate 100 years of this beautiful building. It was finished in 1911 and opened in 1912. So in 2011, we came up with the plan to celebrate the centennial. So we did a year-long activity program for everyone to get engaged with this site, because it's the only site of living memory for us that we can touch touch and experience and go in and observe. And out of those ideas came the concept that we should build a museum so that we can then further develop ideas, share them with the public, because this Gurdwara is a functioning Gurdwara. And so people come and go at their pleasure. We don't have to design per se visits to the Sikh Heritage Museum or to the temple. They come regularly. So we designed a simple idea to build a heritage museum in the basement in the Langar Hall, which used to be the communal kitchen. And it was empty now because there's a new Gurdwara across the street that's much larger, that serves the large population now. And the organizers were very pleased with that. And since then, we've been curating an exhibit at least once a year. Sometimes we do even 2 a year. It's really off the side of my desk, but it gives me a lot of pleasure because when people come through the museum and they see, and I'll tell you a few things that we've done in there, and they see topics of interest to them, it piques their interest to go further and perhaps get engaged with their own historical record. Our goal has been to get people to understand our history, because unfortunately, because we're not in the Canadian record, we don't even know our own history. We've been studying we've been studying the dominant society for so long. And it's only now, I think, we've had the leisure and the pleasure of moving from settling to thriving, where, we were always in survival mode because we were settling in this country. And I think after 100 years, we feel that we can lift our heads and look around us and see, who are we? How do we play a role in this country? And what has that role been? So the museum allows us to maybe contemplate as well as to reflect on our past history, but it also challenges us to think forward. So in the museum, we do exhibits. This year, we're doing on transnational marriages, which are of men and women who were born in Canada, who went back to India to find their spouses, because the communities were small till the 60s and 70s. And they were so interconnected that they were afraid of any kind of blood relationship with someone they would marry. So mostly they went to India to marry. And the men and women that they married, came here, and some of them actually got married in the Sikh temple. So the exhibit explores the idea of transnational marriage and then moves us to the contemporary moment, which says, is what's happening now. And we bring up the topic of internet dating sites as well, as a negotiating tool between people. And that person could also be in a different country, but you're meeting them differently. So it's a very rich and very beautiful exhibit, because there used to be a Del Monte studio here, a photographer who's passed away, who donated all his portraiture. And there's about 8,000 photographs of families in their wedding outfits and with their children. And you can actually see the trajectory of the families over 20, 25 years. And so the photographs of the marriages are in pristine condition. And it's amazing for people in the community to come and look at their photos, from the 70s, and now it's, this many years later. So we also have studied, for example, the idea of religion through a feminist lens. So we're challenging and pushing the boundaries of what we think museums can and should accomplish for our community. And I'm happy to say we haven't had a lot of pushback. There's always pushback, but generally people are very open to whatever exhibit we design.
That is amazing, Dr. Bains. Just the treasures that you're talking about are getting me really, really excited. The photographs, finding out that technology is having a hand in these transnational marriages,
Yes.
and your ideas about the future and what that could bring to the South Asian community. I remember going to the celebration actually, and seeing the inside of the temple, and celebrating with the thousands of people that came.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Very exciting. And so now I know I must go back.
Yes. And we do regular tours of community groups, school children, of college students, whoever's interested. And so we do some public education about the Gurdwara as well. We're on social media. We make sure that the website is well maintained. We are consistently collecting photographs. So we have a digital archive that we've been developing called the South Asian Canadian Digital Archive, sacta.ca. And we have now about 10,000 photographs that we have downloaded and digitized for communities, because everybody has so little treasure, so few things that they don't want to give them up. And we're moving away from the colonial idea of collections where we put things into cupboards and somebody has to come to the museum to see them. We're actually developing a digital archive so people can see it wherever they are. And the little few objects, things that they own, their passports or their photographs of their weddings or children's birth or other ceremonies, we give them back to them with a lot of care and reverence. And then the story remains and lives on the website.
That's incredible.
That's amazing. Thank you. Carrie?
And in looking at this, just to respond to that, it's incredible because the moral imperative of the digital age is that things are changing at an exponential rate. And to not keep up with this transiency and the changes would do an injustice to the entire community. And so the fact of the matter is, this is no easy undertaking, what you decided in the year to create this entire space to honor both traditions and cultures and heritage and peoples and language and all of these pieces. So it's incredible. Now, you spoke so nicely about the way that you are infusing anti-racism frameworks in an innate way, just naturally. But I would love to hear explicitly how you feel the work that you do contributes to the work of anti-racism as well as allyship.
Yes, there's a few approaches that we've taken, and I'll highlight some of them. One has been a collective effort at the university to create a race and anti-racism network of students, faculty, and staff, and even community. And the network is designed not to be a record-keeping network in the sense that we don't keep minutes. We are subversive in that way. We let anybody join if they have an interest in anti-racism work, and then we propel ourselves towards developing protocols with the university through our senior administration and through our faculty and staff. So we're a reference group as well, but we don't keep minutes for any senior administration to kind of come in and see what we're doing. So we are in the university, but we are also a little bit separate from it in the sense that we do our work reflective of community as well as of the society and community that's at UFV. And then I teach anti-racism in the 21st century in my program. So we have every year we teach the course so that students come through that program and learn both the antecedents of racism and then the contemporary issues of racism. And there is no shortage of fodder for this discussion because, as we know, the world is still evolving. We have not created that roadmap that says how can races, work with each other and really find meaningful engagement. So I'm very happy to teach that course because I find that is also a way to transform a student's thinking from whatever position they were in to a newer, more robust understanding of racism. And so the course that I teach, as well as others who teach in other programs as well, all the courses of anti-racism work, come together at a university to create a sense of purpose for all faculties and departments to have this work going on. We also do a lot of public engagement. So March 21st, International Day to Eliminate Racism, we certainly do a big panel. We also respond to world politics, like, for example, the Israel crisis, Palestine, or Ukraine, or what happened to when Prime Minister Trudeau mentioned about Air India being involved in an assassination on Canadian soil. So we're addressing things as they come up through political science or through whichever faculty that's interested in having these discussions. And those are a much more open platform. We create allyship with departments and with faculty across the campus. I am the Vice President of Equity for the Faculty and Staff Association, which is our union. And so the union is very engaged in this work around issues of equity and racism, anti-racism work. And they're an ally when we produce speaker series or we introduce some topics or we have a response to a political crisis. We also have allyship with our president's office and other departments like the international department, which has a large number of international students coming to Canada and coming to our school to study, but who are still quite divided from the domestic population. And so creating those links with people both as a resource, but also to show up, to be a co-conspirator, to be an ally, to stand with us, to put their signature down when we need it, to present with us, to do the in-service. And so after Black Lives Matter, I noticed that we were getting a lot of calls from the departments asking them, and I put this in quote, what should we do? And I guess at some point we had to stop and say, we're not giving you a roadmap. You have to first do the internal work. You have to understand your department. How do people think? Where are they on the continuum of anti-racism work? And then come back to us. Because me telling you what to do is disingenuous, because I don't know the machinations of your department. I don't know your people. And to their credit, they went back and did the work, and and tried to understand staff position, faculty position, administrators positions, and work within the unit. So the allyship has been very much organic, but has also been designed in a way that allows people to do the work within their departments, but with support from us or other people. We do a lot of media and public engagement with CBC, CTV, all the general news sites, and we respond to hate crime or issues of racism that are happening in our communities, both in Canada as well as abroad. So we're very fortunate that we have a lot of very good speakers on campus who can take those calls and can speak to the general public. And we also want to transform the lives of our students. So when they leave the university and they've had whatever discipline they're studying, of course, they have their competencies in that, but they need to be more also competent on society and how racism affects people on a daily basis in their communities, in their neighborhoods, in their schools. And we have that laboratory in our university where we can do that work. So our job and my passion has really to build those frameworks. And as I say, we don't have the roadmap. We're all creating it with each other. But at every milestone, if we can learn from each other and create a little bit more of a roadmap, we can all do this together. So no one is in this alone. And we must feel that we have to have allies. We feel we must have allies all across campus.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like that's the true essence of allyship, that inclusivity, including everybody, honoring all voices and all peoples. But particularly what I loved in your speaking right here was looking at using fundamentally those frameworks of anti-racism in order to disseminate and teach and learn along one another within this capacity in a way that transforms and in a way that elicits change. And there's so many steps in the right direction. There's many more to go. But it sounds from what you're saying here is that those steps have been taken, and now it's continuing and just continuing to disseminate that information. The fact that you have this and teach it to a large group of students as a foundational course is very uplifting. It's something that I think will be the navigation to change, especially transformation, because it's through education that change happens. So if everybody has that baseline of looking at anti-racism work through those frameworks, through all of those capacities, then they now transfer that to their own, both professional academics experiences in order to continue that trajectory. So amazing. Thank you very much for that. It sounds incredible. I would love for you to be part of our work that we're doing as well. I'll now pass it along to Tamika, please.
Thank you, Carrie. Dr. Bains, you talked a lot about your work to support educators, which is amazing. Now, something that I found when I was doing a little bit of research was your Saffron Threads project. Could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yes, it's a very good passion of mine to talk about Saffron Threads. I've always felt that, as I said to you earlier too, that curriculum development and curriculum design is really important for anti-racism work. It needs to be embedded in the school system because we give our children up to a system, the education system, for so many hours every day. And we don't always engage with the system. We don't always know what happens when my kids get to school, although parents are, of course, very aware and, advocate for their children as well. So we have, for the longest time, I've been looking at how the K-12 system does not reflect the history of South Asian Canadians in Canada, and it has a small little paragraph about the Komagata Maru, I think in the Social Studies 10 curriculum. And every time I spoke to the ministry, they would say it's up to the teachers. Teachers can teach, curriculum as they design it, but the teachers were telling me they don't have the knowledge or the resources. So Saffron Threads comes out of a kind of reciprocal relationship between the educator and the community. So we decided we got some funding, and we worked with Open School BC, which is the curriculum arm of the Ministry of Education. And we spent 2 years working with elementary school, primary school, and high school teachers in developing learning resources. So we have about 16 resources developed for Saffron Threads, and we gave it to the Ministry of Education to host. So it sits on their website. People don't have to navigate coming to our website because they may not know it exists, but it sits within the curriculum machinery of the Ministry of Education. And it also will now, I've heard, elevate itself into the anti-racism curriculum that's being designed by the Ministry of Education. It kind of followed the trajectory of Bamboo Shoots, which was developed by the Chinese Canadian community, and they developed curriculum for the school system as well. So we followed kind of the same trajectory to say we want learning resources for teachers to have available to them, so they don't have to go digging for it. And teachers are very busy and they may not have time. And we also worked with principals and vice principals of schools across BC to help them access those resources, because obviously teachers need to access it in order for it to be effective. So we have critical thinking as our main kind of rubric, but through that critical thinking, we bring South Asian elements into it. But we also encourage teachers to look at who's in the classroom. For example, if they're talking about laws that were unjust, they don't just need to talk about South Asian laws against South Asians, but they can certainly talk about, other laws around the head tax or around internment that were created within the government. So the tool that's been developed can be tweaked and can be impressed upon based on who's in the classroom. We also foreground all the learning resources with the First Nations community, so that conversation comes up as well. So it's a small part of our contribution to the K-12 system that we hope students and teachers will engage with.
That's amazing. And actually, I just want you to know that we did include a link to Saffron Threads in our anti-racism resources that we provided through the universities. So,
I love you. Thank you so much. Oh, that's wonderful.
So this can be found through our Met UBC website under EDRT resources, under the Anti-Asian Racism Resources, clicking on South Asia.
That's wonderful.
And we've also included the National Heritage site as well.
Oh, so wonderful. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. All right. So just hearing these incredible initiatives and aspects and all of these pieces that have created such an impact in this capacity. I'm interested in how the South Asian Studies Institute both got started, and you touched on that a bit, and what impact this institute has had both on your practice as well as the practice for others and of others.
It's a really good question. In the early 2000s, when I was teaching anti-racism work and cross-cultural curriculum design, I noticed that we ourselves at UFE had no South Asian Studies courses. I went to the dean and I asked if we could start introducing some courses. She said, can you teach them? And so I started my first course on INCS 392, and it was about settlement and immigration and how those trials and tribulations of families affect them when they come. And it was a sold out course, always had wait lists, and the dean could see there was a lot of interest. So it started just by 1 or 2 courses. And then we started thinking about developing some research capacity within our university And at the time, India was becoming a world power, economic power in the early 2000s. Liberalization of the economy in India happened in the late 90s. And it was early 2000s when you could see that India was growing as an economic power. And we felt that the diasporic connection to India was really alive, especially in the Valley. So we opened the Center for Indo-Canadian Studies initially, and we were just interested in the relationship between India and Canada for the diaspora. We were not studying India as a subcontinent. We were studying ourselves here. And as I said, the luxury of studying ourselves was so pleasurable because we could finally write about ourselves and our own experiences. And the idea of a research institute came out from that very small idea that we need to teach South Asian studies at UFV. Slowly over time, it took about 8 years, we had 32 courses from that humble beginning of one. And we had hired 5 new scholars in different departments, integrated within history and English and social work and others, who were also teaching South Asian studies. So it wasn't just me, beating the bushes. I was very supportive. So the impact of the Institute has been that we are integrated within the university. It sits on its own, obviously, within the research office, but the programming that we develop is always done in tandem with the departments, so that departments can then develop their own resources and their capacities and hire professors and have students in their departments understand their own experiences as well. We have about 25% of the population in Abbotsford is Indo-Canadian or South Asian, and the students are reflected here as well. We have about 25-30% of the students who are South Asian. Now we have 10% of our students are international as well. So it seemed like the stars were nicely aligned for us to do this work. And the impact of the Institute has been, I think, threefold. One has been that we have engaged with students every year. We hire about 10 to 12 research assistants who work with us on research projects. We have, 32 courses that we're teaching. So academically, I feel we've made an impact on the teaching of South Asia within the university. And the second is the research assistants that we have as students. But the third one I'm really impressed by is that the outreach we did with the community has reaped real results. The community comes to us with their contemporary issues that they want us to study or engage with. We run a golf tournament every year that raises money for fellowships. So we bring in scholars over a 4 to 10 month period who will study a topic from different angles, and we present a report based on what we found, and we do it in an applied manner. So as we have some gang-related issues. 4 or 5 years ago, that was a really hot topic here. And so we worked with the Abbotsford Police to look at crime prevention strategies for South Asian communities, because the rubric they had that they thought people join gangs because of this, and this, none of it was matching the South Asian community. So we've become a real reference point and experts in the area. We also present to media regularly. We are called upon to speak to topics of South Asian importance and effect that's happening to us. We publish a lot, we write, we produce books, articles, journals. I sit on many editorial boards. We developed the South Asian Canadian Digital Archive, which is a pan-Canada archive. So I think the impact has been academically, I believe, on the coursework, student researchers who have hopefully taken that study, as Tamaka is doing, to their graduate work and continue, the ball keeps rolling, we hope, and keep them engaged. And then we have really engaged with the community. We've become part of the community.
Wow. Amazing. As everything else, that community involvement, I think, is key.
Yes.
Or else, who are we doing this for? And
Yes.
I say we as a collective, we as an entire society, and that we need to address the needs, the systemic needs that are consistent throughout. And it's pretty incredible that you were able to create a new way of looking at gang activity, for instance, within the South Asian community in that respect. And so far, we find that things get siloed and they're pigeonholed into individualized pieces that are meant as a blanket for everything else and every other community, which doesn't fit. And so I think that goes back to the anti-racism work in identifying that cultural, the values, those pieces that are distinct to individual cultures and peoples. So thank you very much for sharing. Tamika?
Dr. Bains, can you please tell us a little bit about the University of the Fraser Valley in India? Now, how did all that get started?
Yes, I love talking about India. It's my birth country, and the question of home comes up regularly. I say home interchangeably to both countries. I feel like I spend more time in Canada now, obviously, but I still feel my roots are, well entrenched in the Indian society and India itself as a country. I'm quite invested in both education, culture, religion, language of India. But aside from that, when we started the discussion about developing a center and a research institute, one of my colleagues who was from a city in India had gone with the vice chancellor on a trade mission with the premier of BC, and they had met some vice chancellors in India as well. And he met some good friends of his who had become, in the education system, had become higher up. And the idea of developing a twinning program in India came up. And so we went to Punjab University, which a lot of people in the valley are from, the small region in India called Punjab. And they were really interested in starting an undergrad program that students in India could take. It would be curriculum from Canada, but students in India would spend maybe 1 to 2 years in India, and then they could spend 1 to 2 years or more in Canada. And the idea just started from there. 30 students joined a little classroom, and we started a business program, and it just grew and grew. And today there's about 300 students on campus at any given time, and about that many leaving every year, or half of that leaving every year to come to UFE. So they spend 1 to 2 years or 3 years in India studying at our campus in Chandigarh, and then they come here and finish their degrees. They don't have to come here. They can also finish in India as well. But most of the students do come to Canada, and some of them do go back because they've got family businesses or they're running, certain projects and they want to go back to India. But a lot of them do stay here as well. So it gives them a pathway, and it allows them to learn Western education in an Eastern setting with the supports of family and other people around them. So they don't have those other stresses of coming as international students here. They're paying higher fees, obviously, because they're getting a Canadian education, but the curriculum is taught by fully trained Indian professors who we train, and also by faculty who go from here regularly. So we have 3 faculty there right now every term, and we teach business degree, a computer information systems degree, and we have a post-baccalaureate in management. And we have a relationship with the University of Windsor, where students will do 1 year of management degree in India and get their master's in business management out of Windsor when they go to Windsor. So it's been a real success story. And the students who come out of there, I must tell you, our international department tells us all the time that one vertical of students who come from the India campus do extraordinarily well academically, and everyone has graduated, and every one of them has got immigration, and every one of them has succeeded in whatever they started. Now, I think only one student switched gears and went into a College of Arts, and we now run a BA as well in India. So he went to College of Arts from business, but most students have stayed in the stream, and they have finished their degrees with really good grades and done really well. So it's a real feather in our cap to have this campus in India that we just truly enjoy and love working with.
That is amazing. That success rate, 100%, that is absolutely amazing. And,
Yes.
These bridges that you're creating between India and Canada, and within the community, South Asian community, and between the South Asian community and other communities, that is just so wonderful to see. So it's like a plant or a tree that's just
Yes.
been growing and branches everywhere and spreading. Thank you so much for letting us know about that. Gary?
Well, speaking of that branch and those trees and all of the intricate componencies of what you do professionally and the incredible accomplishments that you have demonstrated and spoken to us about today, I think that impact is so far reaching, but we're also wondering, do you have free time? Do you get time to yourself? Do you have passions and hobbies outside of the incredible passions and hobbies that you have within your professional life? But what does Dr. Bains do for fun? What are your other passions?
What a beautiful question for me to really think about what I don't do, but what I should be doing as well. So we are actually come from a long lineage of farmers in our families, both sides, my husband and my families. And so we are blueberry farmers as well. So in my spare time, I do help with the family farm. I'm not as much anymore because I'm pretty busy here, but we live on a farm. So we are active, engaged with the farm at all times. I love gardening. I love being grow. I see blueberries growing all the time, but we do a massive vegetable garden as well. Love flowers. I like to walk and hike in nature. I grew up in a small town in India called Shimla in the north, which was a pedestrian town. There were no vehicles. To my chagrin, I still don't know how to ride a bike. So I that's something I must learn. And I enjoy the outdoors very much, as much as I can, just to be tuned with nature. I do a lot of reading. I also do a lot of public speaking, which I do outside of UFE as well, which I enjoy greatly. I am raising a little grandson, helping raise a little grandson. So that's the joy of our life right now. I live in an intergenerational family where my husband's family lives with us. So a lot of my spare time also is spent in caring for the elderly. And that's both a privilege as well as a responsibility for us as intergenerational committed community members. And so I don't know if my children will look after me, but for now, we're looking after my husband's family, and my family's spread all over the globe. And we like to travel, we like to see the world, we like to visit other people, we like to have gatherings at our home. I like music. I like classical Indian music. I try very hard to fill the reservoir, because if you keep giving, then you become empty yourself. So finding succor and finding strength from other things that reinvigorate me to do more and to continue to do the good work that I'm doing. I volunteer a lot. I am the chair of the Knowledge Network right now. I give to the community through I sit on the Abbotsford Community Foundation. That's also my passion, and I'm giving back to the community. So whatever I have as a Sikh, as a religious, not so fundamentally religious, but as a practicing Sikh, one of the things we're always told is to give back, to do seva, to do service. And so it's not just service to my family, which is important, but to do service to people who maybe you will get nothing in return from, but that you do it with a selfless act. So giving time, energy, your money, I'm a philanthropist, is important for me, because I think those things come back to you tenfold. And so giving back as well as continuing my professional career is important, but I'm not sure they always are very clean divides between the two, but they develop quite well together.
It sounds like you do have quite an incredible balance when you're looking at all of this. And you're right, we have to fill our own buckets and fill other people's buckets. And if only everybody lived by those philosophies and those words. And I know both Tamaka as myself have intergenerational families and helping caregive for parents in that respect. And just even having them part of our lives is really important in that capacity. So thank you so much for sharing. Tamaka?
Dr. Bains, is there anything that we have not asked of you today that you wish to share with us? I know we've covered a lot of ground, but we don't want to miss any piece of wisdom that you have.
I don't know if it's a piece of wisdom, but it's a collective thought process that I think we all should be engaged with, Tamaka. And one of the thoughts I've been having more and more is that we need to support each other's experiences. We're too siloed. The Japanese Canadian community, the Chinese Canadian community, the Ukrainians, the Dukobors, the indigenous people, white European settlers. We sometimes write the histories of these communities as if they were isolated. And what I want to do in my next quarter of my life is to really build a deeper intercultural understandings of each other and build real alliances and networks with each other. So when something happens to a community, we don't say, oh, thank goodness it's not happening to me, but we say, why is it happening to them? And that we come forward for each other and build those responsible networks where we are kind of sure that people are standing behind us, with us. We don't have to be alone in this. The South Asian Canadian history, that when it was being written by us, we realized that the Japanese communities were around us, the Chinese Canadian communities were around us, indigenous communities were, but they seem to be written as if we were in isolation. And I would like to have these intercultural relationships with other communities on similar experiences or different experiences, but in a deeper, more engaged, more giving, more collaborative, more community spirited manner. That's our goal. I've started a bit of an intercultural alliance. We're just developing the kind of thoughts behind these alliances and what they might mean. And on a daily basis, it just means that we believe each other's experiences and that we understand them and that we know that we're not alone. I think this sense of silo and being alone is really harmful.
I agree with the silo aspect that you're talking about. And, for instance, my family, my mother was born during internment in the interior of BC. So, we all have these histories and sharing them together. And like you're talking about the similarities, how can we support each other? That is, a really worthwhile endeavor. And I can definitely see that being something of value to all of our communities. So
I think when racist legislation was promulgated within governments, I think they were quite happy that we were siloed and that's the way they wanted us to remain. And I think we have to not use the master's tools to serve our own needs. So we need to create new tools that say we're not agreeing with the way you silo us, and even continues today, unfortunately, that we have to bleed into each other's communities. We have to feel each other's pain, and we have to build relationships so that when there is a crisis, we know who our friends are. We're not going to you only in a reactive mode, but in a proactive mode to say, we stand by you. We understand your histories. We went through the same things. How is it possible that racist legislation against South Asians, Chinese, Japanese, women collectively could be created and none of us could do anything about it? It's because we were siloed. We're stronger if we all work together with each other. I think that's the next goal of multiculturalism.
And exiting colonialist dominant ideologies in that exact where it comes at the hands of the upper power, higher power, and the way that things should be done. So I love that. Right. That piece and that movement to that narrative.
Well, we are nearing the end of our wonderful, wonderful discussion with you today. I'd like to thank you, thank our guest, Dr. Satwinder Bains, for your thoughtful, impactful, and enlightening responses that really addressed building anti-racism frameworks to transform education. It's just been an amazing time together. Carrie?
Thank you so much, Dr. Bains. You really helped us unpack anti-racism in a clear and a dynamic way. You are by far an extraordinary person who I think just myself, I aspire to be. You have set that modeling of really what we could do as an entire nation, as an entire country and beyond. And I think so many of your points will resonate with our listeners on so many levels. And so what we do is I want to remind everybody of the priority of this speaker series and really that intention of eradicating racism through acts and utilizing the content from this particular series, utilizing all of the key teachings that we've learned from Dr. Bains today and move that to the next level. It could be having a conversation with a neighbor. It could be taking something that resonated with you from today's podcast, turning it into an interactive lecture, a workshop, maybe your own anti-racism session in that respect, but listening to and hearing the voices of it all. And we ask for you as our audience members to continue that conversation. We do have a hashtag at MET, as well as hashtag UBC anti-racism. And we do want to thank Edith Lando, who is willing to fund little projects to take the words of Dr. Bains and the teachings today in this session and move that to the next level. And we do a call for proposals, a call for lessons, a call for workshops and ideas for you to take this to the next level. And all of that can be found on our website, which will be available underneath this podcast. So we quote Nelson Mandela in looking at the education is the powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. So we are asking you to help with this change. No act is too small nor too large.
One last thank you to our guest today, Dr. Satwinder Bains. It's been such a pleasure.
I can't begin to tell you the pleasure is all mine. I thank you for allowing me to speak so freely and giving me this opportunity and this platform to reach people in Canada and beyond. And in some small way, perhaps affect change and learn from each other. And, you know, your work, I congratulate you very much for the hard work that you're doing in the trenches, getting this done. This takes a lot of fortitude and strength and time and energy. I thank you for that. And I know we're all in this together.
We certainly are. Thank you so much, Dr. Bains, and to all of our listeners here today. We wish everyone a wonderful day.